New day.
Time to check Twitter for my Persona 5 Royal news. Let's see. Persona 5 Royal. What? Western release of Persona 5 Royal to censor scenes featuring 2 gay men. But they didn't censor in America. If Atlas is willing to censor Persona 5 Royal, as we know, that would find my censor literally find why is this well? I hope they will censor Persona 5 Royal. So incredibly wanted to censor this world of fire style of one reset era and sexual HW can actual words these censor about Internet, we gotta talk. Today's video will have a bit more of a serious tone than the usual content on this channel, but Persona 5 quickly became one of my favorite games of all time and I'm thoroughly invested in it. However, this does not mean that this video will just be mindlessly defending the game. I understand that although as much as I love the game, it is not perfect, and it is important to have discussions about everything and anything in a civilized manner, especially in today's age of our interconnected world. I've put a lot of time into researching this video, so I'd appreciate it if, before commenting, you hear me out until the end of the video, as I will not say my stance until the very end of this video. Hope you'll enjoy the video and consider subscribing. Skip to this time frame right here to skip the summary of the situation, although I recommend not to because it is important for points I will be making on later in this video. Persona 5 Royal by developer Atlas was in the center of controversy on February 17th when writer Michael Higgin of GameSpot reported on an interview he had with Yunamba, the senior project manager and localization veteran from Atlas. Why? Well, because in the process of localizing Persona 5 Royal, the team will be altering a scene involving a gay couple being interested in Ryuji, one of the main characters in the story, and the 2 factions head-to-head are people accusing it of being censorships and those that support Atlas's decision. In order to not get accused of misrepresenting the situation from either side, I will be reading word by word from the interview. Are you able to say exactly what it is? What part of the game that you were referring to? So basically, I'm just going to say right now, there are these 2 gay men who hit on Ryuji. I think the community had a very strong response to that, and you saw that. That was definitely altered for Royal. Can you expand on how that was changed? Unfortunately, those characters were portrayed as more like predatory. In Royale, I don't think to say we made it mild, but we made it as if they were being very strong enthusiasts for something they like doing. But it's not like they're on the hunt for some young boys or anything. With this in mind, what do people say? The people arguing for the fact that this is censorship say that there was evidently no problem in the first release, as it has made it into Persona 5 Vanilla, and that they were just caving in to the people in a forum called Reset Era, that are commonly known for causing outrage within their circles, and then move it to Twitter in large groups in order to get it trending and get developers to change scenes. They also say that changing the translation from the scene is censoring, as it is changing the original message tried to be conveyed by Atlas, and they are trying to appeal to the broadest demographic by faking their stance on LGBTQ+ representation in video games. Finally, they argue that if this is allowed to pass without any scrutiny, then who knows what else could be censored in the future or within Persona 5 Royal itself. The people arguing in favor of the change said that the original was problematic in its portrayal of the gay couple, especially as they are the only LGBTQ+ representation in the entire game, and that this change is a good step forward in proper representation for them. They also argued that this singular scene that is causing all this fuss is just 2 minutes in a 100-hour game, with it being more than around a 120-hour game for Royal, meaning that the changes are minimal in the grand scheme of things, and that this is not the only thing that the localization team is changing about dialogue, as there were multiple problems with the translation in the vanilla Persona 5. Finally, they argue that due to all of this, the change in the scene is for the better, as it is also a way of improving the gameplay experience for the English audience that got a botched translation in the original release. So now that we have caught up, what do I think? Well, before we cover that, we gotta cover similar cases in the past in order to have a frame of reference to place an unbiased verdict on this topic. I will be looking at 1. What usually happens in Atlas releases to see if this is out of the ordinary in the situation, 2. What other games or media that have had re-releases / remakes do with their adapting their dialogue for the new version, and 3. The possible reasons why Atlas could have decided to change the scene in the first place. First, let's look at Atlas's actions in the past. By looking at the differences between Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden, we can get a relative idea of how Atlus handles the remakes and re-releases of its franchises. The situation is very different between Persona 4 and 5, as there are no major differences in character dialogue between Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden. However, there is a precedent in Atlus being confident in changing even large portions of their games for the betterment of their titles' re-releases, as both Chia's and Teddy's voice actors were changed and they remade all of the voice lines from scratch. Similarly, entire portions of the game, such as the Mary storyline/arc, were not included in Persona 4 Vanilla. This so far seems to fall in line with the changes to Persona 5 Royal will have. However, there's also some big changes to the combat system, such as the party members not being allowed to be controlled in battle as they were independent from the player, which changed in Persona 4 Golden, giving more power to the player and improving the combat system's fluidity and efficiency. This, coupled with the changes to the voice actors for an improved feel of the personality and energy, leads me to believe that Atlus did those changes to improve the game. And although some players enjoy the original voice actors and the independence of the characters in the battle system, the changes made the game better, as it bumped up the Metacritic score from 90 to 93. Would all of this be considered censorship or abandonment of the vision of the game, as Atlus provided changes to features players clamored for from the fans? I am inclined to believe that is not the case, as the changes to Chia and Teddy's voice actors were unnecessary from the eyes of the community, but gladly accepted. Similarly, a feature that is synonymous with the Persona franchise is that of Persona Fusion, and before Persona 4 Golden, there was no way for a Persona to inherit the skills you wanted. You had to rely on the Persona Fusion process to do it for you, meaning you had to go out of your way to find Persona calculators or walkthroughs online to get the specific Personas you wanted. This was a massive change in terms of gameplay of the franchise, as the Persona franchise revolves all around the Personas you acquire and their power. By allowing skills to be selected, some Personas might become a whole lot more powerful due to the fact that they can inherit abilities like Resist Wind in order to circumvent a weakness to Wind. However, while the precedent of changing previous portions of the game is present, changing specific dialogues between characters is not as prevalent as it is in Persona 5. I believe that is due to the much smaller community that Persona had back then, as Persona 4, and especially Golden, was the first large success for the franchise, meaning they didn't have the scrutiny of the mainstream eye when it came to translation and localization issues, which Persona 5 now has due to it being one of the biggest JRPGs of this generation. A similar controversial situation that is happening with Atlus right now had happened all the way back when Tokyo Mirage Sessions for the Wii U came out internationally, and one of the DLCs that was available in Japan that allowed the player to change the outfits of characters to wear swimsuits was removed for the Western release. Dressing your characters in different costumes is something that Atlus does in their titles, and the removal of one of these options alongside a small scene in the game that had the characters in a hot spring infuriated people. The difference between the situation of Persona 5 Royals is that the removal of those things were caused by the strict regulations Nintendo had around mature content for international releases, something that Persona does not run into as it is being published in PlayStation consoles. Due to this, we cannot use this as a fair comparison point, as the removal of these features was not done so by Atlus's own will. A better point of comparison was Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Sharp Encore, which came out not too long ago actually. When creating the re-release of the game, the team at Atlus decided to use the international version of the game as a base, and improve the one from there, meaning that the swimsuit DLC and the hot spring were not included in the game or for purchase, even though Nintendo does not have those strict regulations anymore. Alongside it, Atlus made some choices to edit things that in the game to tone down the game's maturity, such as bumping up the ages of a lot of its characters, moving 16 to 17, 18 to 19, and so on. And changing the third dungeon, which revolved around the idea of photographers taking pictures of Japanese models in sexual and inappropriate ways, to that of being uncomfortable using different outfits, all of which caused contextual information and dialogue to be re-recorded throughout the game to reflect these changes. This time, it was a completely personal choice by Atlus. I believe that in this case, due to the changes made, it wasn't a case of censorship or pandering to the Western media. I believe it was a case of difference in vision. When re-releasing the game, they decided to further tune the game to their liking, now that they had a second chance. And they re-released it with the changes to the age and dungeon, which were, like the case of Persona 4's Golden, voice acting, not requested by fans or mainstream media alike. With all of this taken into account, there is a precedent of Atlus revisiting sections of their games that had no attention placed on them, and reworked them for better fit of the narrative of their games, evident from the Persona 4 Golden's change in voice actors and the more controllable party system, as well as Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Sharp Encore's bump in the age of their characters. With that out of the way, we can now look at other examples from other developers and media franchises to see changes in elements or designs to see if this is a common trend. In terms of other games in the industry, it is actually quite common to see changes in dialogue or gameplay elements when re-releasing or remaking games, especially in RPGs. A great example of this is one of the most hyped up remixes of all time that is coming out extremely soon, Final Fantasy VII Remake. There are plenty of changes between the original and the new one, but some that stand out for the purpose of this video is that of dialogue. In an interview with the director Tetsuya Nomura, news outlet Dengeki Online was told that the multi-part release of the remake lets them get deeper with each part of the story, and that they're planning to adjust the story so that veteran players can once again get excited by the story of Final Fantasy VII. With such a special game in their hands that many consider one of the best video games of all time, and certainly one of the best RPGs of all time, seeing such risks to better improve the product doesn't seem quite out of the ordinary for RPGs. Similarly, Resident Evil 2 Remake has different placements of monsters as well as additional lines for some characters to have more involved character arcs, all of which was done to keep the game fresh and exciting for veteran players, while keeping the unique charm and important lessons of the original game. Characters such as Marvin Branagh received a much more active role in the story's development, instead of the original game that just had him die after giving Leon the blue card. However, no one was clamoring for Marvin to have a more involved role in the story. Capcom decided to do so just to improve the game. That is an obvious departure from the original installment, and an important one at that, as it made the character that was completely previously obscure a lot more important. But this and other changes made where it's done so to improve the game, something that clearly worked as the Metacritic score went from the original's 89 to the remake's 91. I want to leave gaming aside for just a second to talk about the Sonic movie. I know, completely out of left field, but hear me out, okay? When the first trailer dropped and we saw the monstrosity that was the humanoid Sonic, the entire internet collectively threw up and screamed at Paramount for days. It was one of the very few times that the internet came together to panic at the awful meowing and criticize a piece of media due to the just horrifying nature of it. All joking aside, the Sonic movie received record-breaking levels of backlash, but the production team decided to delay the movie in order to change the original production to make it better. They completely scrapped the original model, made Sonic more like the cute, small hedgehog we know from Sonic Mania or Sonic Generations, which is such a massive deal as Sonic is on screen practically all times. After this redesign was made available to the public, practically everyone was clamoring at the fact that Sonic was fixed, that he was made the correct way, the way the original creators would have intended. Now, I want you to put a pin on the Sonic example I'm giving you because I'm going to be mentioning it later. But for now, let's move on to the possible reasons as to why Atlus had decided to change the gay couple scene. First of all, let's mention the reason that Atlus themselves have given to the public as to why this change was changed. In the original interview with Yui Namba, the first question that opened this kind of worms read, "There's still content that doesn't go over well with audiences. How much say do you have in whether or not that content makes it into the game? Do you have autonomy in terms of recognizing that what won't play well and what to do with it? How do you approach that?" To which he responded with quite a lot of information that I'm going to summarize, link in the description for the entire interview. Basically, Mr. Namba said that there were a few NPCs that, while we were doing the localization, our team members felt a little bit of awkwardness while working on it. On our end, it took a lot of effort consulting not just the production department, but talking with our marketing and how they would feel about it if we changed how things were in Persona 5 to this new way. What would the public reception be? What the company would think? Whether it would be okay if we do make the change. The reason given was that the team had felt awkward when working on it, and they consulted everyone, the company included, i.e. Atlus Japan, if it would be okay to do so. Which, if the change did up going through, means that Atlus Japan had to have approved the localization. At another point in the interview, Namba mentions that it was the gay couple scene in particular that made the team uncomfortable, and that the community had a very strong response to that, and you saw that, and that was definitely altered for Royal. In the eyes of Namba and his team, not only did they see friction within their team about the scene, but that the Persona community had some controversy on that topic. Through the eyes of the localization team, it was both responding to feedback and their own small tweak in the vision for the sole LGBTQ+ characters. From this, the two bands we discussed before were created. and both have spun their arguments in completely different directions, using completely different evidence for themselves, while ignoring the rest. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the people that are arguing for the fact that this is censorship say that Namba's words regarding the community outrage is a real reason as to why they changed, and not the other reasons mentioned by him, as those are actual cover-ups for not seeming like they cave into outrage and community pressure. They have also brought up the fact that if this is something that is allowed to change due to the outrage created by Twitter and forums like Reset Era, other portions of the game could be muddied up in terms of the themes, tones, and message due to trying to appeal to a broader demographic, i.e. a Western audience. This would make the games less authentic and bring forth more censorship into the gaming industry. I believe that in terms of their argument, it can fall apart pretty quickly when compared to other cases of changes in re-releases and remakes, or whenever they theorize off of the interview, but it is especially strong whenever they look at the potential ramifications of this action. They focus mostly on the fact that the response to that specific question in the interview invalidates the other responses from Namba, which undermines the strength of their argument as, at least to me, they seem a lot more like a conspiracy theory about how they're just tricking the public and you darn sheeps don't pay attention. They should have focused on their concerns of the video game industry and how, as seen from cases such as microtransactions and loot boxes, when you cut slack to companies just a bit, they push the boundaries until they can't any longer. There's genuine concern a lot of people have. If localization takes too many creative liberties with adapting to an audience, the original message, tone, and cultural richness of the original product could be lost in search of profit. Similarly, I feel like the arguments for having this scene altered completely evade the situation at hand. The original argument came forth from a concern of censorship, not if that scene is worth keeping or not. This side of the argument's use of "it's just 2 minutes of an 120-hour game" does them a disservice, as no one from the opposite side will take your response seriously. A better way to support that this is not censorship is by doing what I just did in the last minutes of this video has been going on, looking at examples of trends both from Atlas and the outside gaming industry in order to create the counter-argument that it is not censorship. If it is more about adaptation instead of censorship, if there is a trend for editing previous lines of dialogue, etc. Well, what do I think? I think that this is not a case of censorship, as seen from previous examples that I've shown, not only from Persona games, not only from Atlas games, not even video games, but just media franchises in general. Whenever there is a possibility for an improvement, whether that be in remakes or remasters or re-releases like Atlas does, more companies, especially in the RPG genre, take a chance to go back and change entire scenes, the roles of characters, and big story portions altogether. The example of Sonic is a perfect one, as that shows that backlash is sometimes good. It can make teams go back to the drawing board and create better experiences for the consumer. To be completely transparent, I do believe that due to this being the only LGBTQ+ representation, it could have been made with a little more tact. However, as the messaging of the original Persona 5 is about the corruption of desires in society, following the 7 deadly sins, the idea that this gay couple is lustful fits within the story and universe. However, as they are the only representation in the game, and the fact that this scene and characters are not being removed, or the game's messaging is being censored, I believe that this is the correct way of handling the situation. When I played Persona 5, I played it in a span of 2 years, so that scene had completely escaped my mind by the time I finished the game. However, going back and watching it now, it is very evident that people, especially those in the LGBTQ+ community, would have a substantial problem with the very minimal representation they get being such a crude and untruthful showing of their community. If things such as the Sonic movie were praised for having abandoned the original creative vision for the movie or the more humanoid Sonic, why would changing the wording of a throwaway scene cause such a problem? We also have to remember that the scene is staying. They're only changing the text box at the bottom to make the gay couple seem less predatory. It does not put the creative integrity of the game in jeopardy, while the Sonic movie redesign did. But the change of the scene causes massive outrage, while the Sonic redesign causes unanimous praise. A change in localization is not censorship, as there's a very clear difference between localization and translation. Translation is the one-to-one, word-by-word meaning of the original content, but in a different language, while localization is the interpretation of the person through their eyes, meaning it is adapted to fit that person's cultural view. Due to the fact that this is not removing the scene entirely, and this was a choice made by the localization team that they verified with the Atlas team in Japan before acting upon it, it leads me to conclude that this is in fact within the vision of the developers and not censorship. Thank you for watching. I actually thoroughly enjoyed researching this topic as I learned some new things about one of my favorite developers along the way, and although this is the longest script I've ever written, reaching 7 pages, the process of putting this video together was quite a lot of fun. An hour after this video goes live, I will be live streaming Persona 5 Royal for the first time on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Luca20708. So if you enjoyed the video, why not like the video, sub to the channel, and check out the Twitch. With all that said, I'm gonna go write another YouTube script they keep postponing. Fuck.